Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akinterinwa, Director General, Bolaji Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Inec, and Dr. Ndidi Nwaneri, Public Policy Consultant and Visiting Scholar, Loyola University, Chicago, United States. Well, Prof and ladies, you have listened to Senator Ayogueze. We started by looking at some of the statements, events, interventions by the Independent National Electoral Commission this week in terms of the announcement of polling units across the country, the upgrade of polling units, also the charge by Inec, the frivolous litigation by politicians and political parties are not in the interest of the democratic process, and that political parties should look inwards. And then we also talk about continuous voter registration with regard to the security situation in the country and how insecurity could perhaps affect that. And then we talked about other issues, electoral reform, ethnic politics, and also within the context of all of this, what Senator Ayogueze's own plans for the future will seem to be. Let me start with you. We have 3 minutes to break. Let me start with you, Professor Akinterinwa, on the key issues that you think are of interest from Senator Eze's submissions.
I think you asked him 8 questions, and all the 8 questions were very critical for me. But let's look at some of them within the 3 minutes. First of all, the first question you asked him on his own evaluation, he agreed essentially with Professor Mahmoud Yakubu. But the way he presented, the way he explained it was from the perspective of mixed analysis. He agreed with him, but also disagreed in terms of what the future will be. For instance, he believed that the ideal thing was what Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, the Inec chairman, was trying to do. But he did not fail in reminding everyone that both the Inec, the judiciary, the politicians, that all of them are involved. In this case, for instance, he gave the specific example of the year 2007, when the Inec was specifically involved in partisan politics, where a relation of the Inec officer was involved. Someone was elected at the primary level thereafter, but they wrote a different report. So in this case, if, for instance, the Inec is now coming out to say, oh, let us go this way, and let us avoid frivolous things like that, when actually Inec was also involved.
Well, I think, note, Prof, let's take a short break. When we return, I'll come back to you, and the conversation will continue. We'll take a short break now. Stay with us. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akinterinwa, Director General, Bolaji Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Inec, is also here, and Dr. Ndidi Nwaneri, Public Policy Consultant and Visiting Scholar, Loyola University, Chicago, United States. Prof, yes, before we went on that break, you had the floor. If you may just conclude your thoughts in terms of your response to Senator Ayogueze's submissions.
One quick point and agreement with his conclusions. The quick point was that when you did ask the question on the disconnect between the Igbo elite leaders and the youth, he did explain that, look, the Igbo youth are not necessarily the main problem, that others, the youth in the southeast, in the middle belt, and so on and so forth, are also agitating. And I quite agree with him, but the issue is this. The Northern Consultation Group, I think the NCG, had written a letter to the Emir of, I think, Kano, saying that they really support that the Igbo people should actually be allowed on the basis of the principle of self-determination to be independent, and that the main rationale for their position is that most of the people agitating for independence, autonomy, they are 50 years old and below. Thinking now that the elite that Ayogweze is, and with all others, they are actually well disconnected. They don't know what is happening. This youth will be there in the foreseeable 50 years, 100 years, and they are the one militating, fighting, that they will find it difficult to relate with them. Therefore, they want them to go away. So in this case, the problematic, as it is now at the level of the youth. So if he now recommends that his colleagues in the National Assembly should look at this issue, I will agree with him. If he now says that elections should be staggered, let's have midterm elections to enable for both continuity and change simultaneously, I will agree with him. And more importantly, if, for instance, like you did ask him, but he refused to answer the question directly, when you also raised the issue that dogs do not eat dogs, PDP solidarity, or moving from PDP to APC, then back to PDP, he didn't. I will also agree with him because it is too early to uncover his strategies so that his enemies will not take advantage of that.
Oh, so Prof, you are saying there are enemies in Nigerian politics?
Yes, of course. Your opponent is your enemy.
Well, Dr. Waneri, over to you.
So I'm going to start with, so I take exceptions to two things that he said. He spoke like a politician. He was very lucid, very straightforward, but I take exception. And I'm going to start with this story in Gwaram Federal Constituency by-elections recently in Jigawa State. So the local government chairman wanted to vote and claimed that he had forgotten his PVC. It was youth corpers that refused, that it is against the law. They will not permit him, and they were not permit him to vote, and they were commended by the Inec chairman. Then the issue of where I have a problem is when he alluded to revolution as the result of hunger. We get it. Poverty. I don't like the way while we understand that there's poverty in Nigeria, I don't like the way he reduced the desire for the protest by young people to, oh, they're just hungry. If you just give them 2 plates of rice, they'll be fine. I felt that he undermined them by that statement. And that just wasn't fair. I'd like to point out history. Fidel Castro...
What you mentioned was moi moi.
Was moi moi. Well, I don't remember the ingredient, but I don't know if we are entitled to say that or to hold that attitude. But what that brings home for me, what I'd like to point out is what he mentioned. So I agree with him. There is a generational divide, then there's a class divide. If you have the intersection of youth and poverty, you are going to have people questioning the state. And he also said, ultimately, responsibility is there. But I won't harp on and on about that, but I didn't like that comment. Another comment I didn't like was him likening unruly protests in the US to that they're behaving like Africans. That undermines all of us sitting around this table because we are Africans. So I'm going to get off my political podium now. One of the things that I'd like to highlight is institutional neutrality of institutions like Inec, institutions like the Senate. Without institutional neutrality, we have something that is bordering on a crisis. Look at, again, I'm going to go back to this case of Mrs. Loretta Onochie, it's been in the news a lot. If we cannot have institutions that checkmate one another, then we're not running a democracy. He talked about the House. He talked about the Senate. Somebody said that Loretta Onochie should not have gone past Senate. Should not. If the president is not a bit worried about what he presents, if the president is not worried about what he presents to the Senate, then we have rubber stamp institutions. So in that regard, I agree with him as well. Another thing I'd like to mention, since, as you said, everybody listened to it, is the question of what he said about transparency, about the complaints that there are more polling booths in the north than in the south. He talked about transparency. He talked about that will address the problem. I don't agree that it is transparency that will address the problem. It is responding to what transparency reveals. So it is one thing to be transparent in what you're doing. It's another thing for the institution, in this case Inec, to be responsive to what the transparency. So hopefully he talked about transparency. Inec should be transparent in the decisions they make. I would add to that not only should INEC be transparent, INEC should be the kind of institution that when we say we have a problem with this, they respond to it. And the last thing I'm going to talk about, because I don't know how much time we have, he mentioned that about litigation. Yes. He was hopeful that if we conclude an election and you want to complain about it, we should have a system in place whereby the issue is addressed before the whoever is elected comes into power. Now, that would also mean an agile judiciary, right? A judiciary that understands the urgency of such issues. If you drag it for years and years and years, then tell us that, oh, you've reached a conclusion when it is years down, that is really faulty. So in that regard, I agree with him. It boils down to the kinds of institutions we have, and we really should agitate for neutral institutions, agile institutions, and responsive institutions. So I'm going to start that. I think I've run out of time. Okay. Thank you.
Yemi Adamolekun, INEC, the way forward, elections, political party primaries, the integrity of the process, continuous voters registration, for us to be able to have credible elections in 2023. These are some of the issues before us.
Yeah, interesting. Good afternoon, everyone. I liked your banter. Two PDP, one former PDP, one current PDP. I think that was. I like the way he pushed it back at you, that you're putting him on the spot. I like what Dr. Nwaneri just said about transparency is only as good as the fact that you reveal or you respond to what it reveals. And that's the sort of current conversation we have about corruption cases. Current administration talks a lot about fighting corruption. But when issues are brought to the fore, the response has sort of left people wondering, are we really fighting? On National Assembly, again, I definitely agree with Dr. Nwaneri. There's no reason why Loretta should even be anywhere near being recommended for anything. The Center for Democracy and Development issued a statement on that, not only analyzing where she's from, her role in government, and the fact that she should not in any way, shape, or form be someone that is entrusted with that sort of privilege of manning our elections, when not only in her role, but the kind of things that she has said while she's been a special assistant to Mr. President. If I'm not mistaken, we've actually sued her because some of the things the federal government talks about in terms of how social media is used, we've sued her based on her use of social media to, I think, defame. I forget what the exact charge is for defaming people on social media. And this whole issue about court and judgments coming before elections, it's just common sense. There's no reason why we've gone and had an election and we're still in court on the outcomes of the primary. It just really makes no sense. And then which then ties to the point around everything pre-election matter should be settled before the election so we're clear. And I do agree with the senator to a degree that everybody has a role in that conversation. So INEC, which is why some INEC officials have been found guilty and jailed, political parties which don't conduct transparent primaries, and that's always a bone of contention. You have two camps. somebody is doing a primary in one location, another camp is doing a primary in another location. Inec has sort of said, if we don't come, and then Inec has no powers. I mean, technically they say if we don't come to your primaries, we can't field you as a candidate, but then the candidate goes to court and challenges that. So the judiciary as well, and the capacity for it to hear anything and everything, things that make absolutely no sense, things that are technically illegal, you will find a lawyer that will defend it and a judge that will give you judgment. And as you said, again, multiple judgments. So I think there are various stakeholders in that. But really at the heart of it is judges won't be giving useless judgments if there was not a case before them, ab initio. And who puts the cases before them? The political parties or the content or the candidates, as the case may be. So we can go around this loop forever and ever. But again, a challenge. Then it speaks to National Assembly and saying that we should give them credit for doctrine of necessity. Doctrine of necessity was in 2010. We're in 2021. So we should be clapping for what they did 11 years ago. I wasn't quite sure I understand it. And it's not that they woke up and did doctrine of necessity out of the goodness of their heart. They were forced to do it. Protest that he also disdained was one of the reasons why they knew they needed to do that. So I think National Assembly issues are, yes, I mean, obviously, there are bills. We can clap for them for freedom of information. We can clap for them for violence against persons, prohibition, violence against VAP Act. I can't forget what the PMP are. But we can clap for them for various things. But the underlying issue with the National Assembly is the fact that part of the main role is to hold the executive accountable. They're meant to check the executive. So if the National Assembly itself as an institution is not accountable, they cannot make the executive accountable. And that, from how I see it, is where there's a lot of pressure on people in the National Assembly. Again, as we say often, there's only one president, but every Nigerian has a senator that represents them out of the 109. Every Nigerian has a House of Rep member out of the 360. So in terms of level of holding people responsible for actions, it's easier in that way than shouting Buhari, Buhari, Buhari. And that's why the National Assembly is coming under incredible amounts of pressure. Also because from constitutional amendment to not passing the electoral amendment, all of this rests with them. And the lack of leadership in understanding where we are as a country and giving it the priority of the issues that are on the table is why people keep talking about them. Because all we hear about them that seems to get priorities when they want to buy cars or when they want to spend millions renovating a building that in the grand scheme of things should be left alone. So that's where some of those becomes the issue of why the National Assembly is under a spotlight. And then lastly, on young people, again, definitely I agree with Dr. Nwaneri. The disdain with the senator talks about young people being restless. Again, he speaks about thinking caps and that the elders or the elites or whatever should put on their thinking caps. I dare say they should put on their thinking caps and think accurately or think about the right things. It's not young people who are restless, who are calling for secession or an issue with Nigeria. Prof made the point about, I think, the Northern Elders Forum wrote a memo to the Emir of Kano. Ayo Adebanjo has been advocating for Oduduwa Republic or everybody go your separate ways for years. Is he a restless youth? The man is over 19.
Yemi, on that note, we need to take a short break. When we return, the conversation will continue. Stay with us. Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. I still have with me in the studio Professor Bola Akinterinwa, Yemi Adamolekun, and Dr. Ndidi Nwaneri. Now, let's take our next topic of the day. In its latest Nigeria update, the World Bank notes that surging inflation is undermining the recovery of Africa's biggest economy, pushing 7 million Nigerians into poverty. The report also notes how low public trust is, recommending, among others, a social safety net for the poor and the power sector reform in Nigeria. Arise correspondent Itoro Udofia brings us more.
Twice a year, the World Bank Group publishes the Nigeria Development Update to evaluate the country's latest economic prospects and developments. The report sheds light on Nigeria's growth while recommending how to move forward. At this forum, leading experts from the public and private sector discussed the newest release, saying with COVID hitting an already fragile economy, the country's long-standing challenges are even more glaring.
Nigeria is at a critical juncture. Nigeria has so much potential, but that potential has not been realized. And with the COVID crisis, the pressures on the economy, the pressures on society have been exacerbated.
Rising food prices, which in 2020 accounted for 63% of the total increase in inflation, may have pushed almost 7 million Nigerians into poverty.
You cannot say that you are a poor country and you're maintaining a lifestyle that is even much more, if you like, unsustainable than people who have the wealth.
Limited unemployment opportunities is fueling some of the biggest crises we see today, with rising insurgency and criminality in the country. These factors contribute to the nation's economic instability.
The thing here to understand is that the fact that there are more people working does not necessarily mean that they're getting higher incomes. But they're being probably pushed because of the needs of the crisis to go and hustle and find work.
Along with a severe economic deficit, many mention the trust deficit between the public and private sector, the rich and the poor. This has made it difficult to know how to make this data accessible and address the issue.
Between now and a year ago, if you had 100,000 naira in your pocket, what is worth now is about 81,000 naira. So what it means is that an average Nigerian or more Nigerians are living in poverty. More Nigerians are out of jobs, worsened even by the pandemic.
But the panel remains optimistic, saying reducing inflation, providing social safety nets to the poor, and supporting small to mid-level businesses is a way forward.
There have to be means to cushion, help ordinary Nigerians absorb the impact of that. And the immediate, most promising way of doing so would be to think about direct cash transfers not for everyone, but for the poorest Nigerians, the working class, low-income Nigerians who are feeling the pinch.
Commitment and willingness were identified as the key requirements for Nigeria to harness her potential to move into a brighter future. But exactly how and when that will be achieved is still a question. Itoro Udafia, Arise News, Abuja. Well,
in the week that just passed, two major developments. This session that has been shown on the screen about the World Bank organizing a conversation around Nigerian development update, resilience through reforms. That process was started. There was also a virtual meeting with the International Monetary Fund with Nigerian officials, and some of the major issues coming out of that were highlighted in that report by the Arise News correspondent. But very important, in my view, would seem to be the submission in these conversations about how, yes, Nigeria seems to be improving in terms of GDP growth, but whatever reform we're putting on the table will need to be sustained. There has to be commitment. The World Bank section talked about elite consensus with regard to trade policy, to monetary policy, industrial policy, and a lot of policies. And elite consensus, what they even interpreted to mean elite consensus, and steps that would need to be taken with regard to insecurity, with regard to unemployment, with regard to the foreign exchange regime in Nigeria. The whole point is, how do you move this economy forward? The World Bank session said the projection is that the Nigerian economy will record a GDP growth of about 1.8% if it takes the appropriate steps. But if we do not, then we will not get up to 1.1%. Those who know this subject say either it's 1.1% GDP growth at the end of the day or 1.8%. It makes no sense. If GDP growth is running far behind like a tortoise behind the population growth. But Dr. Nwaneri, you have degrees in economics. If you can help us break this down.
So, I don't know if I want to engage with poverty, but it is true. Nigerians are getting poorer. I'm glad about what the lady said. She said that if you had 100,000 naira, now you have 2,000 naira, and even then, what can that buy? So the biggest problem is what you've alluded to. If your population is growing faster, so our population growth rate is something like 2.5%. What that means is that if there were 100 people living on a street, by next year, there'll be 103 people living on that street. Now, note that because of what has happened in the last few years, for instance, the banditry we keep talking about, people are leaving their villages. So yam is getting more expensive, food is getting more expensive, and it is reducing. So more money is chasing it. So yes, we are getting poorer in general. And however, not only are we getting poorer, we're producing more and more children. And I'm not talking about individual families. I'm talking about the society at large. So that projection seems accurate to me. The question now is, what does it mean to say that 7 million additional people have been pushed into poverty? We have to realize that the World Bank is not a global organization. It's a private profit-making organization. It looks out for itself. Where are these numbers coming from? Again, institutional failure. Nobody has countered those figures. Nobody in Nigeria has said, no Nigerian institution has said, no, we disagree with these figures. I won't say it's because we don't have figures, it's because we're not keeping a very, very close tab on our society. But suffice it to say that a 1.1% GDP growth rate, when your population is growing at more than that, is kind of like a crisis. What it means is that people that are eating 1.5 times a day should expect that by next year, they probably will be eating once a day. So yes, we do have a crisis on our hands. Yes, we have to take our policies seriously. There was something our guest said. Some of these challenges are so interconnected that the only thing I can think of, given my training, is to say, we need to sort out our institutions. But it takes us back to square one again, because is it banditry you're going to talk about? Is it education? Is it security? What are you going? Is it farming? What are you going to talk about? What are you going to build that corruption and mismanagement will not tear down? What are you going to do? But it looks as if, sorry, it's my job description. It is going to get much worse before it gets better, because we have to roll up our sleeves and clean it up. So I'm going to stop there.
Okay, Professor Akinterinwa, although we have very limited time, but we'll see how we manage the time. Well, we have just 30 seconds. Maybe we should just take a break now on Thisday Live, this Sunday talk show. When we return, Professor Akinterinwa, I'll come back to you. Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. I still have with me in the studio Professor Bola Akinterinwa, Yemi Adamolekun, and Dr. Ndidi Nwaneri. Professor Akinterinwa, let me come to you straight away to comment on the issue before us, which is the position of the World Bank with regard to the Nigerian economy and the way forward.
I would like to situate the discussion within the framework of what Senator Eze asked for, the need for transparency on the one hand, and then the earlier recommendations of the World Bank on this same issue, so that we will be able to put the understanding in its proper context. Now, the World Bank initially said that Nigeria will need to reopen fully its borders, saying that recommending a full and effective reopening of the land borders so that we'll be able to have, you know, good cooperation, good neighborliness. Agreed. The issue now is that Nigerians ask the questions or believe or doubt the government. Some land borders were opened, some were closed. And now, where is the transparency? That is the first issue. The World Bank also talked about the need for full elimination of petrol subsidy. Now, who really is interested in removal of subsidy in Nigeria when it is money spinning for people in power or in politics? the World Bank also raised the need for removal of importation of staple foods from the restriction list. Now, the issue now is that you have an underground economy, not only in Nigeria, but in the whole West African region, accounting for more than 70%. So when you talk about removal of all these staple foods, in whose interest? I raised these examples, for instance. These are some of the recommendations by the World Bank. But Ayogweze rightly pointed out to the need for transparency. So in the economic governance of Nigeria, when there is no transparency, please, all these things we are discussing will amount to nothing. The bottom line is that whatever gain you, Dr. Abati, may be talking about, whether there will be growth, 1.8% 2021, even though in 2020, World Bank said that since 1983 to date, the worst experience we had, the Nigerian economy, shrunk by 1.8%. But they are now predicting that, well, this 2021, we will now have a growth of 1.8%. All our gains have been overtaken by insecurity. What you gain, you spend for maintenance of security. So the social amenities that should accrue to the people of Nigeria amount to nothing.
Well, but you know that there has been increased demand for Nigeria's Brent crude, that's oil, although some people say that's not an advantage. Generally, there's some kind of recovery in the world with increasing demand along the supply chains. And then more progress being made with COVID-19 is to the advantage of many countries. So whatever prediction they have made is to be seen in terms of also the global context, in terms of economic recovery.
You rightly pointed out whether, I think it's she, saying that the World Bank at the end of the day is a private outfit.
1.8% GDP growth is of no use to Nigeria. We need to develop at a double-digit rate. So how we get to that point is a big question. Yemi Adamolekun, well, both the IMF and the World Bank have been saying that the subsidy regime in Nigeria is unsustainable. Hello?
Okay, I thought, so did you end with unsustainable? I thought you were going somewhere.
Unsustainable, and I wanted you to respond to that because even the Nigerian authorities have been saying that even with increase in the pump price of the Brent crude, it doesn't make any difference whatsoever because Nigeria is paying a subsidy of over $100 billion naira every month. And that's why the NNPC cannot remit anything to the Federal Allocation Committee.
Right, yeah, well, it sort of ties with what I was trying to say earlier, and as I conclude that thought, you can't solve a problem that you misdiagnose. So if Senator Eze says that the agitation for self-determination is by restless youth because they're unemployed, when, as I was saying, you had the likes of Ayadibanjo and Professor Stephen Akintoye in the Southwest, who are proponents of that, the way you then respond to it, obviously, is then quite different. NSAS had people across every age demographic, pastors, corporate people who left their offices. So yes, there was that element to it as well of people who were there because they were hungry and there was food. But what's the underlying factor on that? NSAS is going to be almost a year. We've been talking about this fuel subsidy thing since forever. So if we don't put a plan in place to solve the problem of why there's a need for a subsidy, under the Jonathan administration, we tried to do buses. The buses are dead. We've seen that we're going to convert, the Minister of State, Timpere Silva, said we're converting cars from fuel to gas. I don't see a plan for that rollout happening in any way that's tangible. So the point is, subsidy is costing us a lot of money, yes. Young people are unemployed, yes. People feel that Nigeria is unfair to them, yes. If we still do not are not casting a vision for the Nigeria that we want and solving these problems and taking active steps to get there, then we'll still keep having this issue. So again, I mean, we can dice these things any way we want. and talk about these issues any way we want. But at the bulk of it, if we don't fix our politics or fix the structure of how Nigeria is working together, you have states that can do a lot more than don't. And we have states that we're subsidizing because as a state, they should not exist. But so those are the conversations that we need to have that we're not having. So when we are ready to have the hard conversations, we'll be able to fix the problems that we have.
Well, on that note, let's move to our next topic very quickly, and that will be the passing this week of Kenneth Kaunda, the first president of Zambia. He became the first president obtaining the instruments of independence from the British overlords in 1964, and he remained president of that country till 1991. He has been described as the father of the nation, and indeed, in many ways, he was. He was part of the struggle, a member of the Zambian, originally of the African National Congress, led by Harry Nkumbula, and later he became leader of the Zambian African National Congress, and later, of course, he will become leader of the United Independence Party of Zambia. As president of Zambia, immediately he assumed power, he introduced development plans. The first, the transitional development plan, the second, national development plan, and then the third national development plan. But the third national development plan failed, because it was under that third national development plan that Kenneth Kaunda embarked on the nationalization of all foreign entities in the country. And at that time also, he had more or less turned Zambia into a one-party state under the Chona Declaration of 1976. And of course, he was opposed. And in 1991, after pressures from the international community, multi-party elections were conducted in that country, and it was taken out by the labor leader, Frederick Chiluba, who was of the movement for multi-party democracy. Now, Kenneth Kaunda is well known for his book, Zambia Shall Be Free, which many of us read as a WAEC test in our secondary school days. Of course, he did a lot, no doubt about that. Education, he established the University of Zambia in 1966. Also, I mentioned the development plans, but later he devalued the Quata, which is the Zambian national currency, and he's been accused along the line of introducing authoritarianism, African socialism, or what he called Zambian humanism. He was known as a Mwalimu. His two parents were both teachers, and he himself also ended up as a teacher under the Church of Scotland missionary schools. His mother was the first African woman to teach in the whole of Zambia. For his efforts, revolutionary efforts for independence, he was imprisoned by the British colonialists in one instance for 9 months. And he was a man who organized the Cha-Cha-Cha campaign involving arson, the blockage of roads. But he's now dead, 97. Well, some people say due to complications arising from old age. Some people give other reasons. But there's no doubt that he was a Pan-Africanist. And here in Nigeria, he has been well praised by our own leaders here, President Muhammadu Buhari, President Goodluck Jonathan, and President Olusegun Obasanjo, who has described him as the last of the Mohicans. Professor Akinterinwa, this is right up your territory.
You see, Kenneth Kaunda, alias KK, should be remembered, not necessarily for all the good things you have said. I think we should look at him, first of all, as a ballroom dancer, as a guitarist, who took life easily. If you want to recall what Professor Sklar, Professor Emeritus of Political Science in Richard Sklar. Now he said that Kenneth Kaunda is another Nelson Mandela. If you look at what Charles Taylor also said of him, I think he was saying that, look, he's exceptional. Kenneth Kaunda compelled, enforced national unity, but without any iota, without scintilla of brutality in the manner of Mobutu Sese Seko, of Zaire, later Congo. And he has also been described as the African Gandhi. He has been given different nicknames just to show that, look, he was, during his lifetime, exceptional in terms of his Pan-Africanism, in terms of promoting national unity without brutality. Now, the lessons to learn from him, even though our Nigerian leaders are extolling him as a traveler along, the fundamental difference between Kenneth Kaunda and other African leaders, particularly Nigerian leaders, is this factor of brutality. No, he doesn't do that. He finds a way of ensuring togetherness, promoting African sentiments, African dignity, black dignity, without necessarily, being brutal. Now, the beauty of it all, look at the Zambian government declaring 21 days of mourning. Look at South Africa declaring 10 days of mourning. Now, with effect from, I think, yesterday, you will discover that the South Africans do recognize his input as a frontline African president. But I asked the question, I couldn't find an answer to it. Why is it that other frontline countries are permanently, always, regularly recognized? And Nigeria, as a distant neighbor, not by territorial contiguity, but possibly by political propinquity, sharing ideas, defending, Africa, and fighting tooth and nail appetite. We are not recognized. Why is it that, for instance, Ezekwe or Nigerian leaders, or the way Alaba Ogunsanwo professor, another emeritus professor who was there, said, look, the streets in Southern African states, they recognize the roles of the frontline states. Even in Addis Ababa, the AU office, where they recognize other frontline states. Why is it that Nigeria is not accommodated?
Well, because
I don't know,
we do Father Christmas diplomacy. And talking about Kenneth Kaunda, he was also a very strong advocate for HIV/AIDS, science and how to mitigate it, because in 1986, he lost one of his sons to the HIV/AIDS pandemic. And in terms of his Pan-Africanism, he falls in the same category as Nelson Mandela, Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Nnamdi Azikiwe Obafemi Awolowo of Nigeria, Patrice Lumumba of Congo, and he provided a safe haven for those frontline states that you just talked about. Thabo Mbeki's father, Govan Mbeki, and Jonas Savimbi from Angola.
In the educational books in South Africa, never will you find the name of Nigeria as one of those who fought seriously on that. Okay, but I said it because we do Father Christmas diplomacy. Despite the fact that we say Africa is the centerpiece of Nigeria's foreign policy process. But over to you, Dr. Wane.
Two things I'd like to say, because I have very little time. So there's this proverb that until the lion learns to tell his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. I'm going to come back to that. There's another saying in anybody that has done anything that resembles an MBA. They taught us that, let me see, what was the term? To sell at home is to grow abroad. You cannot export what you do not have. So yes, we have done all of this work, but what is our internal structure? Half the time we're squabbling. So how are we going to project ourselves or push ourselves out there to take our rightful place? Who talked about potential? Yes, it was a World Bank person when we were watching. he said that Nigeria, you know, Nigeria, there's this permanent discourse. You say Nigeria, you say potential. You say Nigeria, you say potential. We've been potentialing since I was a child. So I don't know when we're going to reach that potential, but yes, we have taken a leadership position. But you see, this is not about Nigeria. Prof, you're the one that digressed me. We're talking about Kenneth Kaunda. That first quote that I mentioned, when the background research we are required, well, I'd like to do for this program, it was a love-hate relationship with, so we all know as Pan-Africanists, as nationalists or Africanists, that can you tell the story of post-colonialism without talking about Kenneth Kaunda on the continent? I don't care what country you are in. No, you can't. So this is one of our heroes. I don't even see why we are not mourning for him, because I'm old enough to remember the glory days of the Organization of African Unity. There's a lot that we have forgotten. Our self-identity, we were talking about it earlier. Ourselves, our history, our personhood as Africans. We tend to forget that, right? We get caught up in all sorts of things. So this is somebody that we should mourn for at least 1 year. If really and truly we were invested as a society, and there's historical continuity. Somebody did something in my country in 1920, 1940, 1960, 1980. As a citizen of the country today, I should uphold that ideology unless we have let it go. So part of the reason why we're losing our image, or we're not who we should be, is because there are certain things we should take seriously that we do not take seriously. Now, whenever you hear people, when it's ambivalent, oh, he did this, but you see, he was a dictator, oh, he did this, he was a dictator, it is because he questioned the status quo. And that means that he was on our side. So when you read, maybe we should begin to tell our stories better so that people will know about the great man that, or the great man that a person like Kenneth Kaunda was. And I'll stop there.
Well, Yemi, over to you. Kenneth Kaunda, first president of Zambia, now dead at 97. Okay, we lost connection with Yemi Adamolekun there. We'll commiserate with the people of Zambia, the president of Zambia, President Edward Lungu, and the family of late President Kenneth Kaunda of Zambia. Let's take our final topic of the day. Nigeria is set to receive an additional 3.92 million doses of the Oxford-AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccines through the World Health Organization's COVID-19 Vaccines Global Access Facility. The Executive Director of the National Primary Care Development Agency, Dr. Faisal Shaibu, said the vaccines are expected in the country by the end of July. Nigeria had commenced COVID-19 vaccination on March the 5th. Having received almost 4 million AstraZeneca vaccines from COVAX. Due to limited doses of vaccines, the Nigerian government suspended the vaccine rollout after half of the vaccine doses were exhausted to forestall second dose stockouts. All that has now been reversed, following a new directive allowing eligible people to now get their first dose. Dr. Shaib also confirmed that the Delta variant of the COVID-19 is 92% susceptible to Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccines. Well, about vaccines, we have a sound on tape video there, if we can have that.
We now have information that Nigeria will get 3.92 million doses of the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine by the end of July or early August. As we receive additional information on the exact dates of these consignments, we will provide an additional updates regarding these timelines. Recent research from Public Health England shows that the Indian or Delta variant B16172 is 92% susceptible to Oxford-AstraZeneca. I therefore urge all Nigerians who have received their first dose at least 6 weeks ago to visit the nearest vaccination site to receive their second dose for the full protection against COVID-19 on or before June the 25th. I repeat that all Nigerians who have received their first dose at least 6 weeks ago should visit the nearest vaccination site to receive their second dose for full protection against COVID-19 on or before 25th of June, when we shall close the administration of the second dose.
Well, the COVID-19 vaccination process in Nigeria, and you just listened to Dr. Fisai Shaib there, giving the public an update. On this one, let me come quickly to you, Yemi Adamolekun.
I'm sorry about earlier.
No problem.
Well, it is good to hear that we are getting more doses. I think that a lot of work still needs to be done around acceptance of the vaccine, especially in the context where people don't think that they're losing anything by not having it. You still have to take multiple tests to travel. People haven't felt in a sense, the impact of the virus. So it's really not a big deal. But if what we're headed for is herd immunity, then it is in sort of our interest to ensure that citizens do understand that process. They haven't talked, unless I missed it, they didn't go back to their online booking system. So it's also just educating so people know what to do. What I've heard is mostly just word of mouth. People will just say, oh, this local government office or this local government or this area is offering the vaccine. Have you gotten yours? Have you gotten yours? So a lot more needs to be done in terms of making information available so people know where they can get it and what the process is. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Nwaneri.
So I'm really disturbed about this. And the reason I'm disturbed is because I do not know where we're going as a society with regards to COVID and with regards to the vaccines. My concern is that only what are my numbers? Less than 2 million people got the first dose, and less than, well, just a bit more than 500,000 people got the second dose, according to the records. So I'm really worried about what is the policy. Unfortunately, COVID mimics malaria, and apparently chloroquine addresses COVID. So we have a problem. Yemi just mentioned herd immunity. How are we going to get herd immunity? And what is the plan? What is the agenda? I really don't know where we're going and what we're even capable of doing. And even if we got another 4 million, herd immunity is between 60 and 70% of adult population getting vaccinated. So I really do not know where we're going, what we're trying, what we're shooting for. I'm going to end on the government really needs to address vaccine rejection. I don't know how we're going to get there, but we should really focus on getting people to understand that vaccines is not of the devil. Vaccines will not kill them, because if we're shooting for herd immunity, meanwhile, the Delta variant is on its way. So I'll just stop there, but I am really concerned. I'm not sure we know what we're doing.
Prof, we have just about a minute to wrap up.
How many people got the first dose? Now, we are being told, Dr. Shoaib is telling us, emphasizing that at its latest, June 25th, all those who had taken the first dose must come back. You can see the emphasis. Let us imagine a situational reality whereby this donation, this 4 million something is not coming. What is happening to people who took the first dose and will not have the opportunity? Now, those who have not even taken the first dose, what is it that is happening? The policy of government is not very clear to the people of Nigeria. We now come back again to the issue of transparency. We need transparency in the political governance of Nigeria.
Yes, transparency and also accountability. I think both of them go together. In any case, thank you, Prof. Thank you, Dr. Nwaneri, and thank you very much, Yemi Adamolekun. You've been watching Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abachi. For my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next week.